What's up, guys? This is Pink Across. Today I'm going to be reviewing and fixing some teams that viewers sent in. Today I've picked three. Remember to subscribe, comment, and leave a like if you're enjoying this type of content. And before we get into the team review, I'm going to go over some rules. Rule number one, I will be making my ratings based solely off of top level competitive viability. So your team may be very fun, and that's awesome. If you're building for fun, or if the goal is just to mess around and do something cool, that's great. But for the purpose of this video, I will be focusing on absolute top level play. Rule number two, each team will be rated on a scale of 1 to 10. 0 to 2, this is like a really, really bad team, pretty much guaranteed loss at the top level. It would be a significant problem, even for a good player, really, really talented player, to bring this to a tournament, and overall would have a very tough time winning. 3 to 5 is at the point where it's really not good and very likely would lose at a top level, but still could potentially pull out a win. 6 to 7 is kind of the solid range, but it still would need some work. And the 8 to 10 would be the point at which I would say I really like this team and I'd bring it to a tournament. And rule number 3, I'm not going to be changing the key Pokemon in a team or the main goal of the team when fixing it. So if somebody has an odd Pokemon there, even if it's a little bit unviable, I'm going to keep it on the team and try to work with the original design of that team. Without further ado, let's get into the first submission. Okay, so we have here a sticky web team submitted by How. Let's take a look. So we've got a Choice Specs Terra Fairy Ribombee. I guess the idea here is to kind of make it so that Ribombee does more than just set sticky webs, and it can kind of be a breaker in its own right. We have a speed boost, Pataya Berry, Yanmega. This is the special attack boosting berry. So Endure to make sure that special attack boost comes off with Bug Buzz, Air Slash, and Terra Blast Ground, and mostly modest special attack. We've got this Manaphy set here, Leftovers with Heart Swap. Note that this is not Take Heart. This is the Heart Swap will swap stat changes with the target. So if something were to set up a Calm Mind, this Manaphy could use Heart Swap and kind of like take that Calm Mind, if you will. Knock Off, Flip Turn, and Scald with some really interesting EVs here. Got Ogerpon, Wellspring, Cornerstone, pretty standard set here. Not really sure what the defense is about, but for the most part, pretty normal. A Rostberry Kingambit, which that's going to prevent burn, but not any other status conditions. Once again with some very interesting EVs. And a maximum defense Iron Moth here. Still will get the Proto special attack boost, but running agility with 3 attacks there. So based on my initial impressions of this team, I definitely have some issues. I think this team seems really heavily reliant upon webs to be effective, and yet this Ribombee is not really the best set for getting webs up. I think it's very odd to be running a speed boost Pokemon on webs, especially with Endure. It feels like this Yanmega doesn't really need sticky web. I honestly think this Manaphy set is extremely ineffective and easy to wall. I think even with Heart Swap, a lot of setup sweepers are going to be destroying this Manaphy, and it seems like really, really passive, especially for a rest of the team being so offensive. The Ogerpon Cornerstone is decent. It's a good webs abuser. Not a fan of the Rostberry on Kingambit, and that Iron Moth set is a little bit odd. I would overall, I think, give this a 4 out of 10. So let's try to fix this. So the first thing I would do, as I said, I think this team really heavily relies on webs. So I'm going to want to make this a more standard Ribombee. So we'll go with Focus Sash. Terra Steel is going to help to prevent lead Glimmora from rapid spinning. And another thing that's good for that is Psychic. So I'm not as much worried. I wouldn't go Terra Ghost on this because Great Tusk is going to be scared out by Moonblast. And we'll go with Stun Spore and Sticky Web. Actually, I've been seeing a lot of Hatterene recently. I think it's become a lot more popular. So we'll go with Skill Swap just to make sure this team gets webs up because that's the priority number 1. EVs here look fine. This looks pretty solid. Moving on to Yanmega, I think if we're going to assume that Yanmega is kind of the purpose of this team, I wouldn't personally run a Yanmega on a webs team, but I definitely say if you're going to, I do have a different set in mind. So I would go with Choice Specs and Tinted Lens. Especially with Terra flying, this can be pretty scary with Air Slash. You could continue to run Terra Blast. There are some other options. I would say if you're going to run choice specs, you probably want U-Turn just to switch out. Terra Blast isn't bad here. Yanmega does have some other special options. You could run like Shadow Ball if you want to hit Goldengo really hard. You could run Tinted Lens, Terra Ghost, Shadow Ball could be pretty funny. You could run Giga Drain if you're, greedy like I am and you want some healing. I don't think the defense is really necessary. I would just max invest in speed, but I would go with the modest nature. Especially with Terra flying Tinted Lens Air Slash, you could maybe even flinch your way past a Heatran or something. So this could be pretty scary, and with web support, it gets up to a very nice speed tier. This Manaphy, I think this Manaphy is honestly really, really bad. I would never use this on a webs team. I think a much better here would be just a standard Double Dance Manaphy. So we could run Take Heart, Acid Armor, Scald, and Stored Power. You could also run a more traditional Tail Glow variant. Tail Glow 3 attacks I think would work great here. And if we were to go with this, personally, I'm a fan of speedier variants. 248 HP just to minimize a little bit of the hazard damage with 8 special attack. Terra Dragon works, very good for Ogerpon Wellspring and Rillaboom Grassy Glide. But yeah, I think you'll find this is a lot more threatening than a knockoff flip turn set. That's the kind of thing you might want to run a set like that if you had a really bulky team, but this is something more fast-paced, and you want to have almost everything on the team either doing major damage or going for the win. Something kind of passive like that in the middle of a hyper offense web build doesn't really make a lot of sense. I think this is pretty solid. I would just give it a little bit more in attack. I don't really see the point behind the defense. I would also say Trailblaze, even though that's going to make it not have as much coverage. This team is really, really struggling if webs go down, and I think you're already giving Cinderace a lot of entry opportunities. So Manaphy at least sets up on Cinderace, so there's some discouragement from using Court Change there, but easily a Cinderace could come in on this and go for a Libero U-turn or Court Change. So I'm thinking you want Trailblaze so you can boost out of the range where you can let Cinderace in, or if Cinderace does come in and wants to go for something like Will-O-Wisp or Court Change, you can at least Trailblaze and outspeed it next turn. And with Swords Dance, Terra Rock, Ivy Cudgel, you can muscle past even a lot of resistances, so the coverage isn't as important. For Kingambit here, I would say Lum. I understand the purpose of Rostberry here was to be okay with paralysis from something like a Zapdos and intentionally not heal that because the main focus was on preventing burn. But I think the odds that you're going to be in a situation where you are so fearful of burn that you want to be paralyzed are unlikely. So I would much rather here just go with a Lumberry, heal whatever status comes your way. I think that'll be more consistent overall. On webs, I always want to run Kingambit that outspeeds Corviknight, so safely about 173. Rest of this looks fine. I would go with maximum attack. For the HP, 104, I like to have uneven HP just for the sake of hazard. For this, Terra Flying is okay, but I would actually be inclined to go Ghost here just to block Rapid Spin since you don't really have a spin blocker, and Great Tusk is definitely going to try and come in on this guy. And they can also help with Dragonite dealing with extreme speed, which is kind of nice. Okay, going over to Iron Moth. This is a very interesting set. I can respect the maximum defense, especially paired with the agility and the sticky web, but I would definitely go modest. I think you always want maximum special attack to make this as potent of a breaker as possible. And the other thing I would change is the Terra Blast type. I would go to Water here and run Terra Blast over Energy Ball. So you don't really have anything on your team that needs Terra. Manaphy, Ogerpon, Kingambit, I mean everything likes Terra, but nothing demands Terra. So I think having this Terra Blast Water to get past things like Cinderace and things like Tinglu and Heatran, in particular Heatran and Ceruledge, is going to be a big deal. Make it a little more consistent overall, and you definitely want the power. One last thing, this 4 in HP, especially on a Pokemon that's weak to Stealth Rocks, is not a great idea. That'll give you only 4 Stealth Rock entries, or only 3 Stealth Rock entries before fainting, as opposed to 4. And the other thing I like to do is just make sure everything on the team is female to deal with cute, charm, and amorous. So I think those are the fixes I would make that hopefully will improve the team. One potential change you also could make is actually running Gholdengo over Iron Moth. Usually you'd want an Iron Moth to absorb toxic spikes, but with Take Heart Manaphy and Yanmega being up in the air, Kingambit being a steel type, you don't really have as much fear of a usual team would of toxic spikes, and I think having that removal, having that ability to block removal would really help. And also your stall matchup is really, really bad. So you could run a Gholdengo with Air Balloon and something like Nasty Plot, Make It Rain, Psyshock, and Shadow Ball. My preferred Terra type on this is I usually go Dragon or Ghost. We can go Dragon here. And that would also allow you to take Terra Ghost off Kingambit and go back to flying. If you really have your heart set on the Iron Moth, you probably could keep it, but I think it'd be a little bit more consistent with Gholdengo. And I think this definitely Tinted Lens, Choice Specs, Yanmega would be a more threatening set to have on Sticky Web. All right, let's move on to Submission 2. So here we have a Conkeldurr balance that was submitted by Kitchen. So as you can see here, we've got a kind of somewhat bulky investment Conkeldurr, pretty standard set. With the Guts, Flame Orb, Facade, Mach Punch, Drain Punch knockoff. A choice-banded Terra, Ghost, Dragapult, also a pretty respectable set. All Mamola here, notably lacking any way to hit Ogerpon Wellspring, but still a decent set, more special defensively inclined. A choice, very interesting set here with a Choice Scarf, Iron Moth. A Garganackle, and it's the standard leftovers, Stealth Rock, Salt Cure, Earthquake, Recover set. And an extremely ineffective Corviknight. So probably the first issue I have with this team is actually the removal situation. You've got a lot of Pokemon that are weak to hazards. Every single one of these is taking spikes and really hating it. With maybe the one exception being Alomomola because it can regen off hazard damage, but even that, regenerated Pokemon don't like taking a bunch of hazards either because that limits how many times they can really effectively come in. So I would say you need better removal than this Corviknight. The other thing is you struggle against Kingambit. Your entire team, other than Conkeldurr, which is slowly dying due to a Flame Orb, really cannot take a Kowtow Cleave, and Conkeldurr does not like taking an Iron Head. This is not insane bulk. 105-95 is okay, but nothing that a Kingambit can't get past. So having U-Turn as your only attack, that's not going to do against Kingambit. And also, Defog will not work against any Gholdengo hazard stack, and all good hazard stack teams should have a Gholdengo. So I'd say one big change, got to get rid of Corviknight, add on a Great Tusk. Great Tusk is absolutely necessary here. Not exactly sure what set yet, definitely going to be Rapid Spin, Headlong Rush to deal with Gholdengo, and a faster variant. Slow Great Tusk is too easy for Gholdengo to stop, doesn't really work. Other thing I would say is I don't think you need a Choice Scarf Iron Moth. I think you've got pretty strong priority with Mach Punch, Conkeldurr, and also Choice Banded Dragapult is very good. I think you can go with Heatran over Iron Moth. And one thing this allows you to do, now this does open up the fact that you no longer have a flying type, but especially defensive Heatran can give you a really solid special wall, which you were sort of lacking before, with only really this Garganackle to help. And it's overall going to, I think, perform a lot better than a Choice Scarf Iron Moth would for you. And I don't think you need that Choice Scarf Iron Moth. So this will do a lot of what Iron Moth did, just a little bit slower. And also, as to deal with the emerging problem of the ground weakness, I would go with a Mandibuzz over Garganackle. So I've kind of just reconstructed your defensive core here, going from Corviknight, Garganackle, and Iron Moth to Heatran, Mandibuzz, Great Tusk. From here, you've got a few options, and I would say this also still gives you a really good Ogerpon Wellspring switch-in, which you were lacking before. Corviknight is okay, but with only U-turn to attack and nothing really to deal with Ivy Cudgel. Remember, Ivy Cudgel is a non-contact move, so your Corviknight's Rocky Helmet wouldn't have helped against that. This will be a little bit better. So, Heavy Duty Boots Mandibuzz. My personal favorite set right now is Iron Defense Roost Foul Play. what this does is this really shuts down Kingambit, which, as I previously said, is super scary for your team. U-turn, just to keep the momentum going, because U-turn, flip turn core, good to have, good to get in Dragapult. And every one of these switching Pokemon you have, these Alomomola, Mandibuzz, and Dragapult, every time they click U-turn is another opportunity for Conkeldurr to come in and wreak havoc. So I would go with a defensive set here. Not quite max defense, though. I think you want enough speed at least for Kingambit, so we'll hit 219 right there, 92 speed, and the rest can go in physical defense. As for the Heatran set, I think just because of how the team is doing specially, we definitely want a more specially defensive Heatran. As for what kind of set to run, definitely I would say Magma Storm, Earth Power, Taunt is really good. You could run Flame Body here. You have pretty decent fire resist, but just because I'm a little scared of Iron Moth, I'm going to go with Flash Fire. And I would like to run on this Magma Storm, Earth Power, Taunt, and we can save the last as I work on the Tusk. I'd say Rocky Helmet works well here. You are a bit afraid of Mouse Hold, and you've got a Wish Passer, so I don't think Leftovers is as needed as it would be otherwise. I still like Ice Spinner in the current metagame. You could run Knockoff, but Conkeldurr also has Knockoff, and you might want to keep that Knockoff to be strong, especially since nothing is really switching in on a Conkeldurr. I would think now you've kind of got to make a choice with either choosing to put Stealth Rock on Heatran or on Great Tusk. My personal preference here would be Stealth Rock on Great Tusk and then Will-O-Wisp on Heatran. I think especially defensive Will-O-Wisp Heatran is really good. Once again, we'll put in just enough speed for Kingambit and 248 HP. Rest in special defense with a plus special defense nature. And something I always like to do, make every member of the team female real quick. You don't want to get cute charmed by an Amorous. It's not fun. Not a good time for anybody. So I think those sets would be pretty solid. Now for the Terra types, you'd have to test to see what works best. I would say Grass would be good on Heatran. On Mandibuzz, I usually like Fire, just because I can sometimes in the late game Iron Defense up on a Cinderace or something like that and not worry about Wisp. But there are other options you could run. You could run Electric, since Zapdos is looking a little bit scary for the team. We can do that. And Great Tusk, usually just go with Steel on offensive variants. So it gives Tusk a lot of resistances that it otherwise doesn't have. One other option, you could run Acrobatic here with your Alomomola, but since you do have Mandibuzz, you could just Wish as Ogerpon Wellspring comes in, switch into Mandibuzz. If they Swords Dance, they'll die to a Foul Play next turn. And if they click anything else, Mandibuzz will take nothing. And you've also got a Dragapult, so I wouldn't say you need to run Acrobatics, but it's always an option. You could also consider a different item than Leftovers. Alomomola doesn't have any great need of that. Dragapult, I think you can go Adamant. I don't think you really need to be running Jolly in the current metagame. You're really only outspeeding Zamazenta and other Dragapult, and your team is not incredibly threatened by either. Although, now that I'm looking at it, I think Terra Ghost on Heatran would actually be really nice for those Zamazenta. And I guess the last change I would say is to this Conkeldurr set. So I would go with Terra Normal. I don't think you often want your knockoff to be powered up that much, whereas a powered up Facade could be huge against Clefable and Terra Fairy Pokemon like Dondozo. So I would say you want to go max attack, Terra Normal Facade, and personally I would just go maximum speed for those Kingambit, for those Corviknight, and put, I don't know, 4 in special defense, so that's not too big of a deal. Okay, I think this will make this team a lot better. Also, all of these improved and fixed teams will be in the description after the video is posted. All right, let's move on to team number 3. So this is a Weavile Balance submitted by Fryrr. We've got a Life Orb, Terra Ice, Weavile here, 4 attacks, not opting to use Swords Dance on this one. Especially defensive Heatran with Stealth Rock, Magma Storm, Taunt, Earth Power. Pretty standard heavy-duty boots. Great Tusk here notably does not have Stealth Rock because that's over here on Heatran. A Choice Scarf Landorus. Pretty standard for the most part, but a little bit of a special element there with Grass Knot. Pretty standard Encore Swords Dance Ogerpon Wellspring. And a Covert Cloak Goldenko. I really liked this team. Overall, competitively, I'd say I'd rate it about 8.5 out of 10. I think it's really effective. The user who sent this, Fryrr, got 91st rank on the ladder with it, which is pretty solid. But also, I think it has the potential, I would say, to get number one. I think there's a lot of good cores here, and mostly what I have for this team are not fixes, but more so recommendations. I'd say the only thing I would say you really, really want to change is this Gholdengo speed here. So you're hitting 211 at the moment. 219 would allow you to outspeed any Kingambit, and that's a big deal. Because when Kingambit comes in on a Terra Fairy Gholdengo that's, say, got, plus 4, maybe even plus 6, Gholdengo can boost up pretty fast. Being able to outspeed it versus getting killed by an Ironhead is a huge deal, and you were very close. So just a little bit more speed, I think you'll find is worth it on this Gholdengo. One other thing about this that makes me a little bit scared is your stall matchup. You don't really have a great way of breaking stall at the moment. You do have some tools. Magma Storm, Taunt, Heatran can help out a lot. It can be very nice, although Alomomola can come in on this and flip turn pretty much all the time. So stall will sometimes be carrying Alomomola. Great Tusk, this being one of both your knockoff users are pretty easily sponged by Clefable and Corviknight, which are the main knockoff absorbers for stall. So I would say if there was any way I could fix this team, it would be focusing on improving the stall matchup. And the way I would do that is by going the hazard stack route. So stall just lost a lot on the knockoff absorbing side once it lost Gliscor. So I think on this, I would drop Swords Dance personally for Spikes. I don't think you really need the setup here. I can understand wanting it, but I think Spikes would suit the team overall better. And as for this Weavile, one option you could consider to make things a little bit more reliable against the stall matchup could be a Never Melt Ice. You could also consider Heavy Duty Boots if you wanted to, but I think you want the power here. Something else that would make it a bit more effective against Corviknight is giving up Low Kick. Now, I know it really hurts to miss out on hitting Kingambit, but something you could run is Swords Dance here. And that would allow you, alongside with Terra Ice, to really put a lot of pressure on Corviknight and force a knockoff onto other things. And once that Corviknight is forced out and that Clefable can't take hits anymore, they're going to be taking on the Stealth Rock from Heatran and the Spikes from Ogerpon, and you can easily stack up hazards against stall and block their defog forever with this Gholdengo. So by making these changes, you do give up some of the advantages you previously had, but I don't think you're really threatened that much by Kingambit anyway. I mean, yeah, I don't think you were really that threatened by Kingambit anyway. And this gives you a really heavily improved stall matchup. One other option you could pursue, Weavile uses knockoff really as one of its most important stab moves, so you could drop knockoff on Tusk for Stealth Rock, and this would allow you to run Will-O-Wisp on Heatran. So what this would do is, this would help kind of shore up that weakness to Kingambit we just created with this Weavile. But if you're running Will-O-Wisp, I would say add just enough speed for hitting 219 for Gambit. So that's going to be 216 there. And with that set, I'm just going to go 48 for a little bit less on hazard damage. And the only thing I would do other than that is make sure everything on the team is female, which I think you've already done. Very nice. One other option, and I'm not going to say this is necessarily worse or better, but one thing you could do on Landorus over Grassnot is run some Terra Blast shenanigans. I notice nothing on your team is extremely demanding of Terra, nothing relies on it, so it might be something fun to test out to run Terra Blast with a full physical set. I would say the best types would be Ice and Flying. So Ice is just really fun for things like Zapdos that come in and opposing Landorus, sometimes just like destroy a random Rillaboom, and Flying, just a really powerful stab move, turns this Landorus into kind of a sweeper / breaker, depending on what kind of playstyle you're facing. And yeah, I think overall, Really good team, really strong submission, but by adding spikes onto Ogerpon, I think you can turn your stall matchup into something that's a little bit inconsistent into a win every single time. Thank you to How, Kitchen, and Fryrr for the submissions. All of these original teams and their fixed versions will be in the description. If you'd be interested in your team being featured in a similar video in the future, feel free to leave your team in the description below and let me know you'd like to have something like this happen with your team. If you're enjoying this type of content, as I said, please remember to subscribe, and I hope you guys have a great day.